Jonathan Head. I'm the president of the club and the BBC correspondent here in Bangkok. I'm very pleased so many of you came for tonight's, I'd like to call it a briefing really, in advance of the landmark election in Myanmar in November. It has been a tradition of this club to follow events in Myanmar quite closely, something that in years gone by was rather difficult since many of us as journalists couldn't even get in there, at least not on proper visas. I would say that perhaps in recent years we've been somewhat distracted by events here in Thailand and now find ourselves in the strange position of being in the country from which we have safely observed troubles in other countries to be focusing on an election in Myanmar when an election in Thailand seems such a long way off. Such is the irony of covering events in Southeast Asia. There's something of a reversal there. Before we get on to tonight's programme, just to let you know about a couple of things that are coming up in the next few days here at the Foreign Correspondents Club. We're trying to keep as busy a programme as possible and as varied as one as well. Next Monday, the 27th of July, we have the next in our instalment of our World Cinema series. This is an extraordinary film made chronicling the work of a Spanish woman, a teacher who went to live in Nepal, became completely engrossed in the country, and then got very involved in dealing with the earthquake earlier this year and in many other sort of development issues there. It became her life's passion. It's actually an incredibly compelling film called A Mirror in the Sky. The woman, Victoria Subirana, who is the subject of the film, it's a well-known Spanish actress playing the part, will actually be here in Bangkok, and she's going to come to the club to tell us about her life in Kathmandu and how she ended up inspiring this film. It's a very powerful film. It's well worth coming for. It is the kind of thing you will only see at this club. You'll never see it anywhere else in Bangkok. So it's a good event. We're really looking forward to that one. We've also got a panel coming up next week on a very important subject on the 29th of July on the fate of the Mekong River, with all the enormous pressure being put on the Mekong through the multiple hydroelectric projects in China and downstream, particularly in Laos at the moment, to provide power largely for this country. There are enormous concerns about the future of the river and the future of the immense amounts of biodiversity that depend on it. That promises to be an extremely lively panel and very topical as well. Let's get back to tonight, though. It really doesn't seem that long ago that the idea of an election in Myanmar seemed almost an impossible dream or a very distant prospect. Of course, we had the election back in 2010, which was held under the current constitution and which was largely ridiculed simply because of the enormous control the military exerted over it and the fact that the National League for Democracy was not taking part, that Aung San Suu Kyi was under house arrest. All of these reasons, it was not regarded really as a very credible process. However, out of that came a government which has been broadly applauded for pushing Myanmar out of its former isolation and for embracing the idea of reform. And of course, crucially, the whole process of reform was given a ringing endorsement when Aung San Suu Kyi had by then been released from house arrest, decided to contest in 45 by-elections in 2012, thereby in effect recognizing the political system which so many others cast doubt on, and throwing herself into a rather uneasy partnership with the military-dominated or military party-dominated parliament. 3 years later, the next election that is due to be held in November will be the real test as to whether some form of properly representational government will be established in Myanmar. There have been some very significant problems emerging in the 3 years since those crucial by-elections in 2012. Obviously, the ban on Aung San Suu Kyi being president that is written into the military-drafted constitution remains in place. So even if her party, the NLD, wins a landslide in this election, she still will be barred from the presidency by what is widely regarded as a blatantly prejudicial clause. We've also had significant sectarian violence against Muslims, the continuing marginalization and discrimination against the Rohingya population with the resultant flood of people into human trafficking chains here. And inevitably significant lingering human rights problems, growing land disputes, huge questions over the future development of Myanmar, and of course, perhaps the most important issue of all, the continuing dominance of the military over the process. They retain 25% of the seats in the parliament and will do so after 2015. That will give them a deciding say over any potential constitutional reform, something which, for obvious reasons, Aung San Suu Kyi is very eager to see. We don't know how the military's party, the USDP, is going to do in this election, but all the signs are, given they don't have the favourable environment they had last time, they won't do anything like as well. And we will see some, I think, amazing alignments of different forces in Myanmar after the election, with very, very uncertain path for this new, or one should say, revived democracy. The fact is that after 50 years of very harsh and isolationist military rule, the problems in Myanmar are immense, and for all of the cheerleading we've seen, I would say, in the international media as elsewhere about this incredible process of reform, it is still a very uncertain process with enormous difficulties. We're very privileged today to have two of the finest observers of Burmese affairs here at the club, old friends of the club as well. Aung Zaw, who is the founding editor and editor-in-chief of Irrawaddy, one of the most important publications to keep up an alternative news supply under military rule, and still a very outspoken figure, has come here. And Aung Zaw Win, who is a former political prisoner and now runs the Tampadipa Institute, which has been working on assisting smaller parties in the parliament and advocating a deepening of democratic culture in Myanmar since his release from prison. I'd like to start by asking Aung Zaw to give his own outline of his expectations of this election, the forces lining up in it, and then Khin Zaw Win will give us his own view afterwards with a PowerPoint to accompany it. Aung Zaw.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. I was talking with Dr. Khin Zaw Win before we came to the stage that who should speak first. And he asked me to go first, and I asked him when to go first because he has prepared a very good presentation, I assume, and that will make my job very easier. But he asked me to go first, so I'll go first. We have to keep the very good, optimistic point of view on this election. If election is going to be held in a normal country, in early August, because of election date has been announced, that will be in the 8th of November. In August this year, 2-week candidate registration period will take place. And in early September, start of 2 months, 60 days campaign period. In early November, there will be election, a polling day. In 30 January 2016, the current government legislative term expires, which means they have to hand over power to a new government, a new body. And in early February, the Presidential Electoral College will take place, where they will choose the president and vice presidents. In end of March, Thein Sein government, Thein Sein administration will have to leave, and new administration will take over. And probably the opposition parties, including ethnic minorities parties, will form a new government, and there will be a happy ending for Burma. This is a scenario we have. That will be a very happy ending we have in our mind. But that may not happen. So I think we have to really manage our optimism. We've been keeping our cautious optimism, but also remain very deeply skeptical of this whole process. Why? Because since I have been allowed to go back to Burma in 2012, and then after living in exile for more than 20 years, I was very happy to be back in the country. I met people, relatives, friends, and I was very excited. It was 5 days visit back to Burma. The more I visit, the more I got a visa to enter my country. I got a very serious depression. And I realized again and again that the military is not going to give in. And they are going to stay in power. And they are preparing to stay in power. But this time, they are no longer pariah with this because of this reform process in the country, which they receive the praise around the world. And they have friends everywhere in every corner. And President Obama visited the country twice, and US, EU, Norway, everybody involved in praising the regime, the government. And since then, it was very, very, very difficult to keep this process. But because the governments and military leaders, they know that how to deceive, how to manipulate not only the domestic public opinion, but also the international public opinion. And they do it very well. And they're genius. The more I go there, I realize that the reform is a total illusion because of military. And because of they don't want to amend, they don't want to change the constitution. And they have promised to amend the constitution that will pave the way to opposition and ethnic parties, including Aung San Suu Kyi, to have a more deserved places in politics in Burma. But it doesn't happen. And also you see that after they empty the prisons, after they have free and released thousands of political prisoners, now in Burma, in prison are filled again with the political prisoners. We now have over 150 student activists. We have 400 cases waiting, pending to be charged. They're going to be put in prison. And then also the most worrying thing, Jonathan had also mentioned that the rise of Mabata, 969 movement, the extreme religious movement inside the country. And then I again and again I keep telling friends, colleagues inside and outside that it has been manipulated and engineered. There are dark hands, dark elements behind this Mabata and 969 movement. Because it happened 2 months after the by-election in 2012. This by-election, as you see, the National League for Democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi's party, won the landslide. That indicates that this coming election, the NLD will do very well. In spite of whatever damage the other side had done to the NLD. They denounced the NLD as a Muslim party or whatever they've keep telling the public opinion to change. I think at the end of the day, if election is relatively free and fair, the opposition parties, including ethnic parties, will do very well. And that's a point, that's a problem that the military leaders and government leaders, even on that day of election in 2012, they still believe that they're going to win. They still believe that they still convince themselves that NLD was not going to win in the 2012 by-election. But they have won a landslide election. Since then, you can see that the rise of the anti-Muslim and Rohingya crisis starting from Rakhine State and spread through the central part of Burma. And also, there are a lot of speculation about election before the day has been announced. Postponement, military intervention, riots, and then President Thein Sein, they are at loggerheads, conflict, internet split, and Aung San Suu Kyi and the President alliance. Because of that, a military will intervene. We're even trying to remove Thein Sein from the position. All kinds of speculation we had until last week, until the UEC, Union Election Committee, announced that election will be held, and date has been announced that will be held in November. Then there's a happy stories, at least, because since then, there are a lot of prominent, well-known activists. Kokoji, Sima Aung, Dr. Nyonyo Thin, a lot of people, Susanna Lalaso, all those activists decided to put forward their names and join the NLD party. I don't know the decision of the party, whether they will be accepted, and then there will be a lot of conflict. I believe the newcomers and the old people, that whether there will be a lot of resistance within the NLD also, whether they will be allowed to play. But since they don't have a lot of figureheads in NLD, I think a lot of prominent people, the newcomer, will be allowed to take part, and then they will be taking part in the coming election, which again send a shockwave to the other side, the military and opposition, that we have seen the result. I spoke to Kokoji, I spoke to Minkonai, I spoke to a lot of people yesterday, that what they think of the election. The mood has changed. And there has been a momentum. There has been a very positive thinking, a feeling among them. Still, they're very cautious, but that they think that they have seen the outcome of the election because of if these people join the NLD party, are they going to win? They're definitely to win a landslide, and a winner takes all kind of stuff election in November. But whether handover of power or there will be smooth transitional power will happen, we don't know. You can see the BBC interview around the same time with the Commander-in-Chief of Mein Aung. Mein Aung said that he will respect the outcome. At the same time, he was very ambiguous about his position because he also had his own presidential ambitions. And there's an alliance between him and the current president, and there has been a rumor going around that and Thein Sein will extend without contesting the election because of he will have a backing from the military. And then because of that agreement, and Mein Aung can extend another second term as the army commander-in-chief. And also don't forget the old guards. Senior General Than Shwe remain in power. He still remain very, very powerful. And then Mein Aung and all those active players continue to meet him, consult him, talk to him. This is very different political landscape when you see in 1988 when Ne Win officially resigned. He did resign. We kept talking and writing about Ne Win resignation, how much power he has, how much power he continued to exercise. He did until 91, 92, but he completely left the political scenes. He no longer pulled the strings. But Than Shwe seems to have a mission. He's now over 82, 83. People with the mission live longer, and dictators live longer. The demons and the evils, you know, seems to have a, according to my inside source, he seems to have a lot of influence, even though the house is being built in somewhere in a Memyo, in a hilly town, for him to rest and his family. He remained in the new capital he has built. He has secretly managed to build in Naypyidaw. He's going around and talking to people, and people going to meet him and consult with him. He is very much not concerned. He's very much giving him advice to what to do with this coming election. There are plan A. If plan A is not working, there will be plan B. If plan B is not working, there will be plan C. I don't know what, but we can only guess that what is going to happen, what is going to take place in this coming months. But it will be very, 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 very interesting time for us to watch, to monitor, to report, and the media, we ourselves, will play a very important role to keep telling you, to keep telling people inside the country that is what is going to take place, what is happening in the election day. Election day is not that important. I mean, the post-election periods will be much more interesting for me, I think, because there will be a lot of very intense political negotiation will take place. Because if the opposition party wins a landslide victory, then the other side will have to come to make a compromise, and also Aung San Suu Kyi, since she cannot become a president, and they have to make it also compromise that they have to president, and they have to nominate the president, vice president position. Then this election is not a direct election to choose or select the president. This is indirectly choosing president. So there will be a lot of I think political jockeying, a lot of political negotiation will take place around, if election goes smoothly, around January, February, around that time. I think it will be a very interesting time for us to look into it. And I don't want to speculate a lot more, but 2010 advanced voting is a big issue. The UEC has been managed, being organized, but don't forget that chairman of the UEC was very, very close to General Thein Sein. He stayed very close to him. He was a member of the USDP, the ruling party, and he was a former general, and he was part of the arms procurement for the last 20 years, served in the army, and he was a very powerful guy. But he is now chairman of the UEC.
This is the election commission, right?
Yeah, it's UEC, the Union Election Commission. He's the chairman of the Union Election Commission. He's a lieutenant general, former, and his impartiality has been questioned again. And even though the West, the donors, are giving him a lot of meetings and meeting him and trying to make sure that this election will be inclusive, this election will be free and fair, and this election will be going through in a very well manner. And again, don't forget that we had elections in our country in the modern times since Burma regained independence. These elections always push the military to come back to the central part of the politics. The military in Burma is part of DNA in Burmese politics. Don't forget that. So Burmese people have little knowledge and experience in electoral elections and choosing who is who, what is what. And there's a little knowledge. I think I found it that 40% of Burmese state think that this election they can choose the president directly, which is not the case. So there are a lot of problems within the population that how to comprehend the whole process, and that is going to be a lot of going to play out in the coming months. It was a very interesting time. That's why I think, in spite of my earlier mention about going home, I got depressed coming back here, a bit of relief going back again and reporting, talking about my own country and people there. And people want change, and no doubt about it. People don't want this government anymore. People being double-crossed, people being cheated again and again. But if you're Western donors or ambassador, you can drink and smoke opium every morning. But Burmese people don't even have a privilege to smoke an opium every morning. Not like Western donors, ambassador. They can sit there and talk all the bluffing. But Burmese people don't have it. But they genuinely want change. They don't want this government. And they don't want this regime. They felt that they've been cheated again and again and again and again. And this election is going to be a big challenge for those powers that be, who wanted to extend in by hook or by crook, by many ways that they try to extend. But that's why I think a lot of people will go out and vote and trying to remove this government as much as they can. But we will see. Thank you very much.
Aung San, thanks very much. A rather sceptical view there. Kin So-wen, let's hear yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back here. And thank you, Jonathan, for arranging this panel and for your introduction. I tend to think that we in Myanmar, Yangon as well as Naypyidaw, we need a place like this, an institution and a venue. People are relaxed and it's pleasant and convivial, and we can gather, exchange views and information. We don't have that as yet. And those of you who've been to Naypyidaw will know that's a very impressive, big town, but it's very dull, so we don't have this kind of thing. And I've been here almost every year, sometimes on a private visit, and I know that, especially now, there's going to be a lot of heightened interest in what's going to happen in Myanmar. And some friends were telling me earlier that in the 1990 elections, journalists were not allowed into Myanmar very much, so they had to cover it from Bangkok, and then phoning people like me, and then having a television thing. And we were hoping to get more people on this panel, but just the two of us. And Guangzhou is an old colleague and friend, he and his brother, and I'm glad that everybody is back in Yangon. They have an office there, and I've been writing for them in the English edition. And one of the things that you can say that, well, before I get into the dark stuff, at least I'm quite happy with the way the media has been going in Myanmar. It's very open, not only the print media, but also the electronic media and also the social media. A lot of criticism of Thein Sein's government and a lot of political cartoons. I just happen to love political cartoons. Okay, so I've also been asked to give a brief background on this coming election. I would assume that many of you have been to Myanmar and have been following Myanmar, but to those of you who are still new to the region and to Myanmar, I just want to give you just this is not a PowerPoint presentation, it's just a list of points that I want to cover. Someone help with that? This is an old. No, just to go to the next slide. Next slide, yeah. As Guangzhou has already covered a lot of ground, I just want to say a few words about our system. It stems from the very controversial 2008 constitution. Myanmar has a presidential system, but the president is not popularly elected. And we will have general elections for parliament. We have a bicameral parliament, and in its first sitting of the newly elected parliament, it becomes the electoral college, so to speak, for the president and the two vice presidents. So, it has been mentioned, the people don't actually choose the president. They vote for their member of parliament, and when that parliament convenes, somehow they nominate and they vet and they, I think, install the president. In 2010, it was very easy because the ruling party, the USDP, won by a landslide, so they could do whatever they liked. But it's going to be a different setup this time. Okay. Now, I'm sorry I've crammed so much writing on it. The point I want to make is that the importance of this coming elections, which will be held in November this year, if you compare it with the 3 elections that Burma Myanmar has had since 1988. So we don't have to go through that, but in the middle of this slide, you will see that the 90 elections, I call them, it turned out to be a fiasco and a badge of enduring shame for the junta, because yes, the National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, won by a huge landslide, but nothing happens. Not only was power not handed over, many of the parliamentarians, and leaders got arrested, and another, let's say, period of repression followed, and during that period too, I myself became a political prisoner for human rights work, and then when things eased up a lot, well, just after the very devastating cyclone in 2008, the present constitution was enacted, and well, they say that over 90% of people voted yes. It's very, very controversial and very debatable. And the elections that followed in 2010 were dull and marked by the NLD's absence. I personally would have liked the NLD to contest, but they didn't. And of course, it was swept by the USDP and they formed the government then. And after that, there was a period of what we can call a thaw, you know, and there were a lot of hopes. I myself gave the present administration the benefit of a doubt, you know, and welcomed the reforms. And there was this historic meetings between, you know, the establishment led by Thein Sein and Aung San Suu Kyi, and we thought that things were going well. And of course, she was released from house arrest, and then the NLD was allowed to re-register, and by-elections for 48 seats were held in April 2012, and there the NLD won by a landslide, which Guang Zhou has already described. So we had 3 elections. One was a by-election. One way or the other, they were not satisfactory, let's say, you know. A lot of irregularities about it, you know, disappointments, you know. And so now we are going to have this election where all the parties, including the NLD in force, will be contesting, and there'll be a record number of parties, candidates for the 3 levels, you know, the bicameral parliaments and the state and region legislatures. And we have now about nearly 90 political parties that have registered, and all of them will be contesting. And of course now there have been many changes in the past 5 years, you know? So I think we will have a new, let's say, arena and a new ambience, you know, and a new atmosphere, and I would say also hopes, you know, despite all that has happened, for the kind of change that was expected in 2010 but did not happen. All right. Now, the term for office for the administration and for the legislature is 5 years, and I would say that Thein Sein, he started off well in 2011, but this final year has been his worst. You know? And sometimes I even tend to think that the key thing that we need to change in Myanmar's constitution is to reduce the term from 5 years to 4 years. You know? I think in the United States you would call this a lame duck administration, lame duck presidency, you know, things falling apart, you know, and lots of things happened wrong this year. And it was culminated just a week or 2 ago when there was an effort in Parliament to amend the constitution, you know, and it was shut down by a cabal that was formed by Thein Sein's executive and the armed forces, you know. Well, to be fair, the Speaker of the House and part of the USDP, and of course the NLD and other parties, they had this bill which had about 60 articles to be amended, but only 1 paltry article was passed. The rest were shut down, and I think this is where the military's 25% block in Parliament really made its presence felt. And so we know where the lines are drawn. I think Aung San Suu Kyi said the same thing too. So, okay, now the elections are going to be held on the 8th of November. There is a 60-day campaigning period, so it'll start on the 8th of September. But now I would say, well, in all respects, the campaigning has begun, the season has opened, you know, and the signs that we see recently is of people drawing together, you know, shoulder to shoulder, and forming, well, maybe it's still early to call it an alliance or a coalition, a kind of bloc that is going to oppose the military. Because that we know that's where, you know, the forces of unreason or the forces of the past, you know, and the forces of obstruction are. I think not only the military, but Thein Sein has really shown their true colors this year. So I think, well, whether you like or support the NLD or not, there's going to be an effort to have it blocked. You know? And there are many, many scenarios that are painted. To give you just an example and an anecdote, the 88 generation former students, you know, they didn't form a political party. And let's face it, there are differences between them and the NLD, but they issued a joint statement. And just a few days ago, Kukuji, one of the leaders, joined the NLD. And there'll be other people from the 88 generation joining, and they will contest the elections. And I've been told privately that, again, despite their differences with the NLD, they've got to present a united front. And again, the Myanmar people, the Burmese people, we call it the revival of democracy. We had democracy till 1962, but they've been away from that, distanced from that for half a century. So the kind of things that we're discussing now, all these concepts and ideologies and the procedures of elections and all that, well, don't have much resonance with the bulk of the Myanmar people. Well, I think they're going to vote with who they support, personalities, charisma, those things count. And if they see a united front of civilian Democrats arrayed against the dictatorship, it's a sure way to get votes. So I think that's the direction that we are going. But at the same time, we have to also bear in mind that what we're talking about is not just the center part of the Burmese Burma, or Myanmar. There's also the other Burma, which you all know about, and sometimes it doesn't get enough attention, and that's the ethnic minority nationalities, and also the other minorities, who are not even regarded as nationalities. Myanmar is really noted for its ethnic and cultural diversity, and that also is one of the roots where one of the longest conflicts in the world has been dragging on. Okay, so that is a kind of introduction and also setting the scene, I would say. Now, as about to the title of this panel, I've just put down some points about winners and losers. And this was for the president's term of office, the 5-year term of office. And when I drew up this list, there was no clear-cut, I think, way of demarcating who are really winners and losers. There are lots of, names and items in between, the maybes, and perhaps. So this is just, I think, just a beginning, and it's not to be regarded as final or definitive. Well, sad to say, top of the winners list are the Buddhist extremists. I tell audiences, especially in Europe, that there's a definite move to the right in Myanmar politics. But my friends in Europe say that that's the case in Europe too. And of course, the media, no matter what they say, lots of journalists are being arrested and locked up. But compared to the dark days of total censorship in the past, the media is really very vibrant, very courageous, very outspoken, and not only, like I said, print media, but also on the social media too. And the other thing is that if you visit Yangon, you will see that. The traffic jams on the roads, and the skyrocketing rental prices, real estate, a lot of deals being done, and on one level too, well, tourism is booming, I think the government has also liberalized with visas, and entry too, and they are betting a lot on tourism. So not much to speak about in the terms of winners. Now, losers at the top, yes, you have to admit, is China. China was the military regime's biggest prop and the biggest partner up to 2010, and then things happened, and now it's a very unhappy situation. I get invited to China, and I visit China quite often as well. So in a way, I can gauge, the people's sentiments and feelings on both sides, and it's going to be another long story. And because of the renewed fighting in the ethnic periphery, the people of Kachin State, Kachin regions, and the people of Kokang are suffering terribly. We had a little event last month to mark the 4th anniversary of the resumption of war. There are hundreds of thousands of IDPs and refugees, and not counting the Muslim populations who are also displaced and languishing in camps. And we'll talk about that later. And of course, you have also mentioned the Muslim minorities, and there's a feeling that is it really between two communities, or is it something that has been sparked off, something that's been manipulated? I talked to a Muslim member of the National League for Democracy in Mandalay just last week, and that person said that no, we don't have any problems between our communities. It's just the dark hands at the back who are playing and pulling the strings, manipulating things. And no matter what Thein Sein's government has said about economic reforms, I have to also mention there's been a succession, unending stream of foreign experts, and statesmen and foreign ministers and academics who've been coming to give advice in Naypyidaw for 4 years, But there's precious little to show for that, because the poor and the landless remain poor and landless, even more than before. You see? It's okay. And again, the very leafy and pleasant city of Yangon is now congested. It's almost a risk to try to cross a street now because of that. And then jade mining is also because of the environmental damage, and also I think the Chinese factor. There was a Gems Emporium in Mandalay, an annual event that's held, but this year there were very few traders who came from China, I'm told. And this is not the end. These will continue beyond 2015. And now that we are nearing this very important election, these are the issues that the country is faced with. In my previous slide, I just made a demarcation, the difference between the winners and the losers. This is about all the issues that the country is facing, and not just the government. It's just we are all of us are facing. So I deal a lot with the, like I said, with the political parties. I've got relations with all the parties, and now I'm helping the new parliament a lot, because we've had a break of half a century. And I would say that of all the arms of the state, parliament is the most democratic, as it needs to be, and they need a lot of assistance. The members of parliament, they have to live in this little dingy apartment blocks, with no assistance, no telephones, no internet, And I try what I can, to give them exposure, to take them on trips abroad. And I've divided the issues into 4 broad components. At the center are the issues that affect the whole country. And it's also a carryover from what I've said, the persistence of poverty, of armed conflict, military dominance right at the center, land, and human rights abuses. At the upper left corner are the issues related to governments. On this side, it's the issues related to the ethnic nationalities. It's just because of that, some of them are very specific. And on the right here are the economic issues, and over there, the issues that are related to the neighboring countries. So, like they say, it's not a very capable state that we have a very capable government. So sometimes, just to prevent things from getting out of hand, and also, what do you do with a weak state? You just leave it to itself. Civil society is making a lot of strides. I'm helping, like I said, with the legislative part of the state. But on the whole, the ability of the state to cope with any or all these issues is still very much in doubt. And that's what we still have to bear in mind, The impression that you get in Naypyidaw and also on these state visits is that, okay, the state is omnipotent, and it can do everything. It has all this support. I think you really have to look behind that facade and see the state and the government for what it really is. And this is also another diagram. It's about the issues that will be very, I think, prominent in the coming elections. So these are issues that are more concerned with the electorate and what the parties and the candidates will have to face when they go out on the campaign trail, you know. And I think I'll also share this with some of the major parties so that they'll be able to have, you know, some assistance with their campaign platforms. In the center are the issues that affect the country as a whole. And again, I put religion on top, you know. Second would be ethnicity, then federalism, language, again the military's role, the police and judiciary, you know, almost still untouched by the reforms, and also education. Now, in the 4 outlying circles, I have divided the Burma, the majority ethnicity, into rural and urban, and the non-Burma and the non-indigenous. So it's also quite a list. So I think that's a very brief overview of the situation. Now, coming back to the main topic of what we are going to discuss this evening is about the winners and losers. Also to add to continue from what Guangzhou has said, of course, in an election, you try to grab as many of the seats as you can. I think the 2 major parties are going to go all out to do that. And I tend to even say now that the real action will start the day after the elections. You know? Now, according to our constitution and also to the procedures, there is a kind of a gap between election day and the installation of the government. It's about 3 months, you know? Stretching from early November to March. You know? And that is where the the manipulation, the pushing and shoving, you know, and the backroom deals, you know, and the horse trading will happen. Let's hope it's a normal democratic process. We have it in other countries, and it doesn't get violent, you know, and it doesn't get unpleasant. But we can never be sure. Now, as I've said earlier, the Democrats, I'm very encouraged to see that are now more or less rallying, you know, together. And the ethnics also, well, they have their own course of action, but I wouldn't say the ethnic nationalities are anywhere pro-military. Now, arranged against them are the ruling party, the USDP, and of course the military, you know, which has a 25% automatic non-elected seats in all the legislatures, and also 3 critical cabinet portfolios, you know, as defense, you know, naturally, and home affairs or interior and border affairs. And these are held by ministers who are serving senior officers. And there's also another very shadowy organization known as the National Defense and Security Council, which you can say is sort of supreme and paramount, you know. It consists of the president, the 2 vice presidents, the foreign minister, and the military ministers, you know, home affairs, defense, and of course the commander-in-chief. So it's a moot point in Myanmar. Okay, does the military commander-in-chief outrank the president? You know, they're both military officers, but who is more powerful? And now, like I said, at the end of the term, I think it also relates to the internal power struggles between within the USDP, that Thein Sein's so-called reformist government is now teamed up with the military. And both of those leaders, just last week in Japan, stated that, okay, if the people want, we would also assume the presidency. You know? The people can't choose the president, you know. It's a very murky affair. So I think saying that if the people want me, is sheer hypocrisy. And it's an untruth. Okay, so what we are seeing now is that it's also a very common, let's say, Burmese trait of political organizations, you know, and institutions to split along personalities and personal rivalries, you know, ambitions. Now, the ruling party USDP is now split into two factions, one led by Thein Sein and one led by Sri Man, the speaker. And now, with the support of the powerful military bloc, Thein Sein seems to have the ascendancy, and there's now intense speculation about what will happen after the elections, at the elections, and after the elections. You know? And like I said, the kind of horse trading. Now, Thein Sein, well, of course, he was seen as a reformer, but as you can see from the this diagram, it hasn't been much to talk about, much to commend his first term. So, why on earth would the country give him a second term? Why does he want to do it? And for the military commander-in-chief to really aspire to the presidency, it really smacks of this kind of dictators for life. That, okay, they already have this a firm grip on the constitution. It seems that they want to have a kind of lease, perpetual lease on the presidency as well. So that is one thing that we really have to be concerned about. And I would say all the rest is just, as we said, window dressing, right? So, okay, I will just end with what we can expect in the elections. I'm sorry, there was one other slide that I didn't put up. Party-wise, the main loser is going to be the USDP, because it had won the 2010 elections by unfair means, massive vote fraud, advanced voting and all that. And so it's only natural that there'll be a reduction in the number of seats that they will get, right? And the natural winner, of course, will be the NLD and its allies. Okay, that's right, but to what extent? And that's very important, Well, the 25% of the seats are automatically reserved for the military, and like they have displayed in last week, they hold the cards there. So, okay, the two major parties and the minor parties and the ethnic parties, they will all be jockeying. The competition will be intense, but I don't really think, maybe I could be wrong, that any of the major parties can win a landslide. People have been asking me for estimates. Well, for the NLD, I would say between 30 to 50% of the seats. A simple majority, a bare majority, but not more than that. The USDP will suffer a huge reduction, from the number of seats that it has. It'll be lucky to get 30 to 40%, because the other parties in Myanmar, I think federalism is also around the corner. The ethnic nationalities will all vote along ethnic lines. So that's why we have this preponderance. And next month, there's going to be a little workshop in Yangon. It's held by a Danish organization, and it's going to be on coalition building. And they've asked me to be a resource person there. To go back, Myanmar politics is very weak on coalitions. So I think the Danes, maybe they have something. So they know what's coming. So I think coalitions, or workable, effective, successful coalitions, are going to be the order of the day. And on the whole, I'm not speaking as an academic, but I think that way, I think we'll be on firmer ground, because look at Myanmar's past, Myanmar's past. If one party wins a landslide and carries the day, disaster is just around the corner. Okay, I'll end by federalism. That's also one thing that the country has hankered for and pined for all these years, and I think we have to make a go of it. And let us also discuss in the amendment bill. Well, the structures are all there, but I think we also have to get. I tell my ethnic nationality friends, that okay, the concepts already, but you have to be prepared for that day. It's not just being vocal and critical. One day you have to run your own states yourselves, and Myanmar states are not ethnically homogeneous. There's a lot of diversity within the states as well. So there's always this specter of what happened to the former Yugoslavia, in the Balkans, and we have to be very careful of that. I won't talk about the conflict and the peace, because it's going to be a very long, drawn-out affair. We hope for the best, but and we've been discussing this just a few minutes ago, and you can't be very, I'm not very optimistic about it. There could be an off chance, but it's going to be a long, drawn-out affair. So I think I've already exceeded the time that was given to me. So I think we can proceed with the questions and answers and the discussions, and we'll have more to talk about. Thank you.
For those who want to ask questions, the microphone is there. Could you identify yourselves and keep your questions brief too, please? If anybody wants to take the microphone now, please.
Thank you very much for all your insights and sharing with us, both Guangzhou and Xiaogu Kenzhaohui. I have a couple of
Can you identify
comments.
yourself, please?
Oh, sorry. My name is Ken Omar. I'm the coordinator of a human rights advocacy group called Burma Partnership. I just want to, my questions will actually, I want to direct to both of you for whoever would like to answer, or both of you can answer. Before that, I want to also say something. I mean, you...
Can we stick to questions, please?
Yes, sure. But I want to just make one comment because it's very important to link to what both speakers said. Because when you said the people are being cheated again and again, I want to also say something that people are already being cheated with the coming elections already. Is one thing, is in many areas, if you go outside Rangoon, in the remote areas and rural areas, the people are actually being asked to come and take the photos, saying that they will get the development aid. In return, the next day, they are getting the membership of the ruling party, USDP. So I just want to say that. Adding to that, the question that I have for both of you is, now some are saying there are internal dynamics, Dr. Kenzhaohui, you already mentioned about the split between Schuman and Thein Sein. And also that we know Thein Sein is not in the candidate list of the USDP now. But the question that I have is, President's advisor, Nathan Ladd, formed the new political party. So is this, in your opinion, is it actually is a way out for the current president to continue in power? That is actually the new party by the president's advisor is a proxy party of the ruling party that they are playing, in the same game together? That's my first question. The second question is, are you concerned that some donor countries, some might be worried that NLD has no capacity to be a government? And therefore, maybe the current status quo might be better after they have invested too much already for the past 4 years. So is this something like, in your opinion, how would you respond to that, if there is any concern, and because something that I'm hearing? So thank you very much.
Thank you. So first question is, as the president sneaking in through a proxy party of his advisor, would that significantly extend Thein Sein? And the other is, we'd heard the other questions after that.
Go ahead.
I think Dr. Kenzhaohui is the appropriate person to answer all questions, I think.
Okay.
You ducking out, are you, Aung?
By the way, we're all colleagues and friends, so it's okay. Okay, you really come to the core of the issues in Myanmar now. Yes, one of the president's political advisors formed a new party known as the National Development Party a couple of months back, and it's been...
Could you name the advisor, please?
Nathan Ladd. So the president has 9 advisors, 3 political and international affairs, 3 economic, and 3 legal. So he is, rather in the background, he's been holding a lot of political courses for people. And then he resigned. Of course, he had to resign as presidential advisor, and now he's the head of that National Development Party. So the general feeling when it was announced was that it would be kind of a fallback, party, plan B for the regime, because the trouble between the 2 factions and the 2 leaders in the USDP has already been brewing, and it's quite intense, I can tell you that, So there was a lot of rumors that nearly 100 senior officers will resign from the military and join the NDP, but of course they've been denied by the government spokesman and people like that. So I think definitely it is something that they will be holding in reserve. Now, there was a
Sorry,
situation-
can that make a real difference? You've got big parties like the USDP and you've got the NLD. Really, could a new party like this grab a lot of seats, do you think?
I really don't think so. But I think what they're really worried about is that if there is a real split in the USDP and if Schuman, for instance, gets the USDP under his firm control, what will happen to the executive? Right now, I think not many people are still aware of that. Only about a week or 10 days ago, 2 ministers from the Office of the President, the Office of the President in Myanmar has 6 ministers, and 2 of them, very prominent, one is Aung, who's running the peace process, and the other is Thein, who is handling international relations, were rejected by their own party, the USDP, as candidates in the coming elections. So I tell people that it's really a slap in the face.
These are the absolute key reformers, the most prominent men in Thein Sein's cabinet. Yeah.
But the slap in the face was actually aimed at Thein Sein, you know. But the 2 guys got it. So, but well, they can stand as independents, and also the thing is that after the dust settles, let's say in February, following the presidential system, the president can nominate his cabinet from within Parliament as well as from outside Parliament. So, I mean, if Thein Sein does become president again, these guys could be reinstated as ministers. It's no big deal of that. Yeah? So, like, well, to go back to Keomar's question, I think it is something the NDP is a party, an organization that will be held in reserve, you know, to be used as and when necessary. You could say that. Now, about investments, well, we can know that, we can be sure that, I think, up to about a couple of years ago, China was the biggest investor in Myanmar. And after the Myitsone Dam was suspended, Chinese investment fell. So it's a big concern in both countries. We know about that, you know. But about the Western investments, we know the state of what's happening in Europe too. But I think many from the West especially, and also from the region, are adopting a wait-and-see attitude, you know, about, say, who's going to be the next president, and will it be, let's say, continue with the reforms, and will it be pro-business, you know? And I think that's what people are concerned about. And again, you know, things are changing so rapidly in Yangon and in Myanmar. A big property development in Yangon called Dagon City, you know, is quite big, and foreign investors very close to the Shwedagon Pagoda, was suspended, you know, and also scrapped because of pressure from those extremist Buddhist monks, the Mabata. You know, so everyone's saying, you know, well, I'm not anti-business or, you know, or anti, let's say, investments, but you know that this kind of thing will not, I think, strengthen or even sustain, you know, do anything to help investor confidence in Myanmar, you know. So, well, why didn't they think of this before? And also with the Chinese investments, and also with this current investments, you know, why didn't the government think of this before? And weren't these things put into the documents? You know, you just can't dismiss millions of dollars, you know, of investment just like that. So, of course, well, on the bright side, we have Coca-Cola coming back, and Heineken.
Those bright sides.
And Yangon streets are clogged with cars, like Bangkok was 25 years ago. So it's an intolerable situation. I can't stand Yangon anymore. But I think there are lots of uncertainty still up in the air, lots of ifs and perhaps, you know. So, but I think the West, well, it's no secret that they are betting heavily on Aung San Suu Kyi, and also will Aung San Suu Kyi be favorably inclined towards foreign investments. What Omar said about the NLD, I think it's been talked about quite a lot, you know, inside the country and also outside, about the NLD's competence and capability, and also about its economic, you know, programs and what it would intend to do. So that also adds to the uncertainty, I would say. Thank you.
Aung San?
Yeah, I think, let me add that the new nationalist new party, I think, kind of a backup plan for Thein Sein. But again, my theory is that my working theory is that if Myanmar, the army faction is ready to back him up, Thein Sein has no worry about coming back to political life. There's a rumor about Thein Sein being very indecisive. He's never been decisive. He's always been indecisive anyway. He's very coward, has been known in insider, but he always finds his comfort zone whenever he finds it. But when he wants to be opportunist, he goes out with those armies and so thing on minister for peace process. But he doesn't make decision. According to inside sources, he's very indecisive. He doesn't know. He doesn't want to take a risk. But that they are the people around him wanted him to extend, wanted him to build his image, because they think that partly one of your question is that the donors countries and the Western investment means in terms of the investing in put in a bet on a round horse, I will call it, and Thein Sein regime, that I think they are worried that if a position comes into power, who will protect their business, who will protect their investment. And interestingly, China made a very bold move just before the election, inviting Aung San Suu Kyi, and I kept saying that China invited Aung San Suu Kyi as a pragmatic politician. China did not invite. There has been a deal, and that China never invited her as a Nobel Peace Laureate. It's foolish by the Western press or Western human rights group to telling her to say something on Rohingya or Chinese activists being detained in China. She will never say that. And when I spoke to the Kenyon's faction last week about what they think of Aung San Suu Kyi, because they've been dealing with her last 20 years before they've been removed, and they said, impressive. We got to learn something from her, because she act like a real politician when she walk into the people square and then talk to a Chinese president. And Chinese, you got to look at the geopolitical also perspective in this election, because it is not just domestic. It's violence between the China and the West are playing in this game. And China made a very bold move, and they are not going to work with the winner, as if they're acting like we're going to pick a winner. So this is where I think the West and China will have a huge, I think, division or on this election, and who is going to win, who is my friend. That's I think strategic game that they have been playing.
You're saying you believe China is actually backing Aung San Suu Kyi?
No, I think China has made a very pragmatic and bold move, I said. And then because of China visit, Aung San Suu Kyi visit to China has sent a very strong message inside the country. Because if you look at the social media site and public response, it has been tremendous, overwhelmed by people. People don't like China, a Chinese investment, of course, but people were shocked, and they were, because they love Aung San Suu Kyi. So they somehow changed the attitude, the way that they look at China.
So this helps China, basically?
Somehow, yeah. It helps China somehow. And in terms of the Thein Sein, alliance with Myanmar, all that, it's still very early to say. Thein Sein doesn't want to come back, but Thein Sein people, definitely, Thein Sein team wanted him to come back, extend to stay, so that to preserve their interest and their longevity or whatever. If they can stay, they will stay another 20 years.
Thank you.
And donors, of course, donors have their own vested interest. And then I think if Ayawadi or Swan or Myanmar or any border-based or exile-based groups are Western proxy organization in the past 20 years, they are no longer a Western proxy. The proxy are sitting in Yangon. They are members, they are NPC, new youth, whatever diversity groups. They getting money from Swiss, US, everyone. They got $2.5 million. All those. I think this is also preparation that in case if Thein Sein and the team left, and those ministers will become patron of this organization, will continue to run this organization as Western puppets proxy organization. That's why I want to make a comment.
Next question, please, Michael.
Thank you. Michael Mackey, freelance. Just two quick questions. The first one is, elections elsewhere are usually determined by economics. They're usually about the economics. You two seem to be painting a picture of an election that's fundamentally about politics. Is that the case? And is there actually any subsidiary economic debate going on, and what are its parameters? And the second question goes back to the first premise, which is that it was mentioned about the President of Yugoslavia. Is there any feeling amongst either, for want of a better term, the intelligentsia, or amongst the electorate, that this is an election with high stakes, that it might be a catalyzing factor for a potentially much more disruptive was the word that went through my head, but really I think much more disagreeable situation, maybe even a civil war or ongoing conflicts?
Thanks. So first question, is there an economic debate? Second one, do people fear the country falling apart as a result of this election? Either one of you can go first on that. Off you go.
I think I don't want to talk too much. I think everyone is watching on this election, and investors, and I don't think giant companies are not coming yet. If election is outcome is in a very smooth coalition type, as he said, if there's a compromise that like in 2010 or 2011, 2012, the whole world praised terms of this rapid transition, then everyone will come in and a lot of investment will come in. But in terms of economic debate, no. But what people are expecting is that if the current government has gone, because under the current government, there are a lot of new cronies. We had cronies in the past. These old cronies are fading out slowly. That there are a lot of new cronies, a lot of big corruption in the construction areas, so many areas that media somehow fail to expose the whole larger picture. But I think people know that. People are fed up with this. I think that's one of the reasons. That they think, whatever the case, they think if a position, whoever, Aung San Suu Kyi, I don't know whether they have a sound economic policy. They said so, but I don't know. If they come, they think country will be better off. That's what they're thinking.
Do you think that in the campaigning, politicians will be successful if they play to the sense
Definitely.
of people having lost out in this reform period?
Good question. I think this is a very disappointing thing, that even Aung San Suu Kyi and Koko Kyi or whoever, they don't play this card. Similar as if they don't know how.
Is there somebody you think who will play it successfully?
Very well.
Who's going to do that? Who's going to play that?
Who will do that? Okay.
Because that can play very well if you've got angry people who feel disappointed. Somebody who taps into that could really...
That's why if even Aung San Suu Kyi scenario, if Aung San Suu Kyi comes into power, for instance, let's say, and if in 2 years, if she cannot deliver, what will happen? There will be uprisings.
Okay, my response would be just to complement, what's been already discussed, Well, I suppose in the West and also in mature democracies, there are definite election campaign platforms and agendas, and I think the NLD and the major parties are beginning to do that for the first time, because in the past it was just on personalities, and we are seeing that. We'll see that very soon. It's going to be revealed, they say. But for the ordinary voter or the ordinary man in the street in Myanmar, political and economic issues are intertwined, because people feel that, okay, we need a change in the political makeup of the country, and only then will we have a better economic life. Just to give you a little anecdote, I work a lot on land issues. When you go to the central heartland of Myanmar, like Shwebo, the people there, the farmers, are very bitter, and we can speak very openly now. They say that, okay, in these elections we are going to vote against anybody or any party that's even remotely connected with the military. So that's how bitter they feel about it, you know. So I think it's also, in a way, broadly rather naive, saying that, you know, a more democratic government, you know, or a freer political atmosphere will bring a better economic life, you know. They could be very disappointed if that happens, you know. And again, I think Omar has also said this. I personally, a lot of my colleagues and friends in my circle have a lot of reservations about the NLD's economic, you know, let's say policies, you know, and the agenda that it has. So it has to be very careful, you know. And there are people who say that they despair of giving any economic advice to Aung San Suu Kyi, but she never listens. So I think that has to change, and it has to really, like I said, you know, deliver. We can't wait for 5 years. And people will. I expect the NLD to get quite a few cabinet portfolios at the very least, you know, and they have to deliver. You know, this country has been starved of what you can even call a democracy dividend. Okay, the second question I think is also related to, especially with the ethnic nationalities. Now, with our diversity, there are states, you know, like next door, Guyana State, where things are pretty well, I think, stable. I wouldn't say stable, rather quiet, you know. Well, of course, there's been this shooting and skirmishes about the Asian highway. But if you talk to people in Kachin State, you know, all the Kachins are very bitter against Thein Sein and the army, you know. And I think that also will be echoed in places like Kokang, Northern Shan State, the Palang, and even with the Shans. You know, there's been no headway, no matter what you are hearing from Chiang Mai and all the trumpeting of ceasefires and peace talks. So that is also another thing that for which the country seeks an answer from this election. Yes, certainly the stakes are very high. You know, what could be higher than a situation where people are still losing their lives, you know, and children are having to stay out of school for 4 years now and not getting enough to eat, you know. So I personally think that the ceasefire negotiations and the peace talks have been handled very badly, you know, and the military is barging in, throwing its weight about, you know, showing that it's a state within a state. So, yes, okay, now we're going to have newer faces, fresher ideas, perhaps in the next parliament and in the governments. Will they be able to have better inputs into this process? I think that's one of the biggest hopes that we have. Okay.
Thank you very much. Next question, Jeannie.
Jeannie Halassi, I'm a freelance journalist and filmmaker. Ko Aung San, can you please share your analysis of what role you think ethnic media will play in covering these coming elections, and even in the context of Irrawaddy's coverage, how important it's going to be to get reports from ethnic areas, particularly those outside of major cities and towns? And what is your assessment of what influence at all, if any, does the two major parties, such as the NLD and the USDA, have among ethnic constituents? And Saya, if you could also address what you think the role of other significant ethnic parties, such as the SNLD, are, or in Chin State, is there going to be an impact that we're going to see from ethnic parties fielding candidates? Thank you both.
Thank you, Jenny. I wouldn't have much to say, but ethnic media groups, after the opening in Burma, are doing very well. We got to give them a compliment and congratulate them on their performance. And because of the coming election, I think they will be very wide-ranging coverage on ethnic parties and the voting system and election day as well as. And ethnic media groups were set up along the border areas many years ago. And since they've been allowed to go back to Burma, and the penetration, the trainings, and the way that they work, and they try to relay the messages and news have been pretty good, I would say. And also, your second question about ethnic parties, I think we got to look at and watch the Rakhine State, if you agree. This time, everybody is talking about we have a vice president. One of the vice president is a Shan. It's a kind of a quota system, and everybody is now talking about whether there will be in second administration and someone from the Rakhine State will become vice presidents, and everyone is talking about AMP, one of the strongest. They're doing very well in their region, and Shan and Arakan's and Karen, and they are doing quite well. I think Shan's and Arakanese political parties are doing very well. They got massive, I think, support. I'm sure that during the election day. And sorry, Jonathan, I want to go back to very briefly to go back to the question about the country will fall apart. I think I want to say one word: watch Rakhine State. Watch Rakhine in conflicts carefully, and if there's any Chinese diplomats or representative sitting here, you can come out and confront me. And I want to say one word: Chinese has been arming the war in Rakhine since 2013. And Chinese has invited Aung San Suu Kyi. Chinese are playing with the fire. So I think it's very interesting that before and after the election, watch Rakhine conflict, I would say.
Thank you very much. Kinzo Win, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, fine. Do we have another question? Please. Is the mic on? It should be on. We're slightly, the mic's not quite working. Let's try another one.
Maybe this one? Oh, yeah. Thank you. My name is Nicholas Nihan. I work at the Embassy of Belgium here in Bangkok, and I'm covering Myanmar from here, so you will excuse my limited knowledge of your country. I've been there 6-7 times. I would like to go back to the economy, and my sense was, because you said at the beginning that the government is very good at deceiving people, manipulating people, but there is something that seems obvious, is that whether they liked it or not, they open up the economy. And I have the impression, as we've seen in many countries, that once you open the door, one reform is, like coming after another, and it's very difficult to put the clock back. So what is, according to you, the influence of the opening of the economy on, I would say, the opening of the political system? A sub-question to that is that when I see young Burmese, in Yangon, but maybe it's just my view, which is perverted by what I see, young Burmese in cities, I have the impression that they too have a better opportunity. Like they're 20, 25, they're very eager to learn something. They have an opportunity compared to their parents, who might be 45 or 50. That's what we've seen in Eastern country in Europe. Don't you think that this layer of the population wouldn't be inclined to vote, some of them, for the USDP? Because after all, Mr. Thein Sein or his government can pretend at least that, well, they are responsible for what happened over the past 5 years. So this is my two questions. Thank you,
Nicholas. Yeah. So the economy.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Thein Sein groups are thief, so I don't know what to say to your question.
I suppose the last question, the point is, can the USDP trade on the fact that they can claim to have opened the country up and still be the party that delivers development? I mean, after all, we've seen the same happen in Indonesia with the old Golkar party. We've seen other parties do that. UMNO does it very successfully in Malaysia, even though people know they're corrupt. Could the same work for the USDP?
Okay. First of all, thank you all for posing such very deep and searching questions. They are very, very, I think, relevant. About the economic opening and its relations to the opening, a political opening. well, of course, the classic case we have in this region is China. Well, we've had reforms and unbelievable economic progress for the past 30 years, but there's hardly been any political opening. Well, you could say that that's because it's still a one-party state with very strong and effective state control. And of course, there is, well, I'm not an academic, but there is quite a body of opinion saying that, yes, economic openings will lead to political openings which are irreversible. I think there's also people, even in the United States, who think that this will eventually happen in China. That's, of course, one extreme case. Now, I do agree that the economic openings, at least, are there to stay. It will be very difficult, if not impossible, to clamp down again. Now, if you just transpose this to the political side, in a country like Myanmar, that would also seem to be the case, as far as the situation shows us. Myanmar is a weak state, and I think to impose the kind of effective controls that they had in the past, would really set the clock back for everyone, including for the military. And of course, there is also the perennial worry that we hear time and again, especially from friends abroad, that will there be a regression, or backtracking and all that. I think it will be the cost for the regime and the government will be exorbitant. And I said there are some terms, like I said, I'm not an academic, like the opportunity costs. If they are really, if the costs of imposing such controls are higher than what they could expect to get out of that, I think they would probably decide against that. I think that is generally what the situation would be. But of course, there's the concern about journalists being arrested and locked up, and the brutal crackdown against the student protesters. Also, well, those are things like examples at the other end or the other extreme. But these examples also will persist, for quite some time. The second question about young people, yes, I would start off by saying that the USDP has quite an active and sizable youth wing. The NLD has that too. I think the USDP is better organized. Even older parties like the NUP, they still have youth wings. I think that's also a kind of a fad. But I think in some of the rural areas, you talk to young people and they said, no, we are going to vote USDP, because we joined when we were very young, and it has done a lot for our region, And of course, there's also the natural rivalry of two parties, which you see extending into every corner of the country. But again, I think, of course, in the ethnic areas, like I said, Myanmar is a country of great diversity. There's a lot of despondency. Again, I cite Rakhine State, and also very high levels of drug abuse, which some people attest is also, manipulated, deliberate, and of course, being affected by the war, and the state of the education. When you go into the issue of young people, let me also point out that in national politics too, another generation shift is going on. All right, I think you know quite enough about Burma, Myanmar to understand what 7th July means. 7th July 1962. That was the time, just months after Ne Win's coup, that they shot, quite a large number of students within Yangon University, and the university system was closed down, and the Students' Union building was blown up by dynamite. Okay, so that anniversary is marked when we were political prisoners, it was marked in prison as well. But now it's happening right in broad daylight in Yangon. No? Okay, we are at the end of July. On the 7th of July, I'm sorry I missed that. There was an event in Yangon University. The authorities tried to close the gates, but the young people got in. But the students, some of them were probably not even born in 1988, you know, and they were there. Young men and women carrying wreaths, you know, and banners, and the fighting peacock flag, marking 7th July. Okay, I have to ask this question. Where are the former student leaders then? Where were the political leaders then? You know, they were very, very quiet. And it was these students who marked that anniversary. So I think this is ample evidence that another generation shift is happening. Perhaps these students will be even more radical than before. There are some accusations that they are, you know, encouraged by leftist elements. You know, the Communist Party movement hasn't really died out. So, but I would say that, you know, there's also, okay, at the other end, you have to also admit that there's also a certain degree of disinterest in politics. You know? It's easier to travel abroad now, to get jobs, to study abroad, to get a well-paying job with an international organization or with a company. So, and also lots of young people are moving to places like Singapore. So there's quite a broad spectrum when you look at the state of the young people in Myanmar. But I would say the shift is happening. I think Aung San Suu Kyi herself realizes that her party will also have to, I think, like they say, make a pitch for the youth vote. You know? And it's not going to be automatic. In 1988, it was automatic. You know, everyone, you know, who was in their teens or in their 20s automatically supported Aung San Suu Kyi. But sadly, that's not the case anymore. So yes, I think there will be, I would say, different aspirations, you know, and different agendas for young people. And of course, education plays a big part in that. You know? So I also want to touch upon that, you know, that together with the other reforms, education needs to be reformed as well, especially the universities.
Could I ask both of you, just on that point about Aung San Suu Kyi, all the way through the last 3 years since Aung San Suu Kyi came into Parliament, there's been a huge focus on her relationship with Speaker Shwe Man, who's very powerful, of course, in the USDP. Do you still believe it's likely that there would be a partnership between those two, given that Suu Kyi cannot take the presidency, assuming that the NLD does very well in the elections that they bring? Is that still a very likely outcome, or has that faded away?
Yes, that speculation was, like you said, around all the time. But I think she made a very, I think, I would say, strong statement last week, saying that, okay, she can't become president, but if the president candidate that the NLD supports to become president will have to be a party member, you know, a present party member or someone who will join the party eventually. So that kind of automatically implies that they're not going to support Shwe Man.
Is there an alternative NLD candidate?
Well, they have two, but both of them have, I think, shrugged it off because of age and ill health.
Yeah.
You know?
This is Tin U and Win Ten.
Tin U and Win Ten. And there are other ex-military officers and all that too, but they're not of that stature. So I think they're really in a bind about who will actually they'll be supporting.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Can we make sure it is a question, please? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Maung Chonu. I'm a former political prisoner of conscience. I was arrested in 1974. You guys, everybody should know it. This is very important today. I am also president of Burmese Rohingya Association in Thailand. Then my question, rather than question, I would like to say something and then question.
Can we just have a question, please?
I love Aung San Suu Kyi. That I did a statement and the NSK and the Ravadi, many, the news media announced this, published this. It was when she ran by election. Still, I love Aung San Suu Kyi more than one could say. I'm a Rohingya. And Kozo before said that, according to his speech, just I noted that. International world. Donor, so-called donor. When Obama would like to visit the Myanmar, I was arrested. Today I confess it. I was arrested in Thailand, but this is not published. Very gentlemen were arrested in the 5-star hotel by the Thai authorities.
Can you make this a question, please?
Okay, my
rather than a
question
statement?
is, again I say I love Aung San Suu Kyi means, I don't love I don't like to use the USDP guys. That's why I say I love Aung San Suu Kyi. It doesn't mean that I love every
What
walks
is,
of
sorry,
Aung San Suu
can we
Kyi.
just go back to a
My
question,
question
please, not a
is, do
statement?
you guys think that when 20%, you understand, 25%, according to the so-called Nargis 2008 constitution, which was opposed since 2020 election, especially Aung San Suu Kyi. Under this constitution, under 25% army in the so-called parliament, so-called Lueto, I use so-called. If they exist, how can be, you say there will be election and your headline is loser and winner. Whoever Aung San Suu Kyi or Thein Sein, as per, because the Thein Sein is not my usage, Dr. Zani teach me. And if anybody won, they can be above the 25%, because still I have many members.
Sorry, I'm just
Yes.
going to stop you here.
Do
I don't
you
think anybody
guys think
understands.
that-
Sorry, can you just stop
Do
it
you
now?
guys-
Keep the
no,
question
this is my
simple.
question, sir. Do you guys think that if 25% or so-called 2008 constitution is still working, within abolish it, before abolish, is there any election or anything can be meaningful? This is my answer from you.
So,
Conditionally, I love Aung San Suu Kyi. Again, I'm talking
So
to
you're
you.
basically saying,
Thank
do you
you
believe
very
any
much.
election can be meaningful under this constitution?
Thank you very much. This is my question only. Sorry, I'm a bit not well. That's why, a bit shaking. I apologize, and thanks to you giving me time.
You might actually have added also, which is I think is going to be a lot of people's minds, is there going to be any change in the status of Rohingya people as a result of this election? Seriously, I think that'll be on a lot of people's minds.
Okay. Now, about the 25%, there could be no better or clearer illustration of this than, what happened in Parliament 2 weeks ago, when the amendment bill was shut down by that 25%. All of them. So, like I said, is there to block anything that, which the military thinks that is going to be against their interests. Of course, the long-term objective for all of us is to abolish that, And of course, when they go to the West, I think the Commander-in-Chief has said that eventually, we will phase out like the Indonesian military did, but we don't know how long that's going to take. But this is something that we really have to put our shoulders to in the years ahead. And I think this year especially has really brought that out. Perhaps in the past years there has been, like I said, a kind of euphoria, seeing things like through rose-tinted glasses, saying that the military will be inclined to change. I know the Americans are trying to do a lot about that, but I think this year, true to form, they've really shown their true colors. So that's what we have to set our minds to. About the Rohingyas, I would like to tell all of you here that...
I don't like to listen from about the Rohingya from you, This is the general question I have.
Okay, I think what Jonathan has said,
Okay.
just briefly, is not part of the question. Very few people are speaking out on this. Aung San Suu Kyi does not speak on this, In April, during the Songkran festival, I was invited to Dhaka, and I went there. And the Myanmar ambassador there at the dinner came and very pleasantly told me not to mention the Rohingya word. But I did, So you have to test the Burmese politicians. Are they brave enough to talk about Rohingyas? You can ask that to Aung San Suu Kyi when you meet her. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Aung Zaol, say.
Not much. I think, Rohingya issue, I think Aung San Suu Kyi might have thought that, my reading is that it was too early to speak. But when she realized it, now that she has to say something, it was too late. I think that's the problem. And also, to tell you the truth, this Rohingya crisis, if election is going to be held in a very peaceful manner, next coming 6 months or 5 months time, will not have much impact, because a lot of Western media talk about, criticize Aung San Suu Kyi. But at the end of the day, I think I'm very sad to say that it won't have much impact. I think the Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD will do well. I think she knows and she realized the situation very well. I'm not defending her, but when she realized it, it was too late to speak about this issue. And a lot of politicians and activists also in Burma are very shy, speak about this issue. And sadly, very few people inside the country support Rohingya issue. And it will take a long and tedious process to get some kind of dignified recognition for Rohingya people inside the country. It will be a long process, I think.
Thank you very much.
Only one question, but the Aung San Suu Kyi is in the country like North Korea. North Korea, 99% support, only 1%, one party, the same as Myanmar, also the same. So I don't believe any Myanmar national, any Aung San Suu Kyi.
Can we just stand aside? Sorry, can we stand aside now, because it's not for statements. Thank you for questions. There's another question, please.
My name is Alessandro Ursic. I'm a freelance journalist. I have two questions. One is about Aung San Suu Kyi and her perceived softness on Rohingyas and Muslims in Burma, because abroad she's been condemned by most international observers for her silence, but in Burma, actually, precisely because she doesn't contribute to this intolerance and racism towards Muslims, she's actually criticized for being soft. So, is there any way to gauge this attitude, to measure this impact in an hypothetically free and fair election? Let's say people that would not vote for Aung San Suu Kyi because of that, would these people vote for Aung San Suu Kyi 5 years ago, or these are people that have never liked Aung San Suu Kyi in the first place? And the second question, in case, assuming there is a free and fair election and there is a happy ending with the NLD getting a majority and somebody from the NLD becoming president, of course the international media will speak about the new Burma. The tag of the new Burma would be there. We all know how things work in Myanmar, the 25% of seats to the army, corruption, cronyism. So what actual changes could we expect in case of a happy ending in terms of economic policy, corruption, cronyism, these kind of problems?
I think to some extent some of these questions have been dealt with already. We just talking about Aung San Suu Kyi. Did you mean, assuming the NLD wins and Aung San Suu Kyi, of course, cannot be president, what kind of changes realistically will we expect?
Exactly, yes.
I don't know if you've got anything else to add on that, to what you said already. Will there be significant changes in policy if there is an NLD-influenced government, let's put it that way, without Aung San Suu Kyi occupying the president's chair? Is the NLD capable of that?
Yes. Definitely, yes. I think I don't speak for Aung San Suu Kyi, and I think we've been blacklisted because we have written a lot of critical analysis and editorial about our leadership, NLD shortcomings and our failure of last 2-3 years or whatever. That the ELD is not blacklisted officially. Don't quote me. I'm saying that they don't like our criticism. But still, I think if Aung San Suu Kyi comes into power, I think there's a definite yes, that because of, she has to realize that she has to work within the system. What she has been doing the last 3 years completely and Aung San Suu Kyi. This Aung San Suu Kyi, the other Aung San Suu Kyi in 1988 to 2010 is a different Aung San Suu Kyi, I think. The Aung San Suu Kyi we see now as a politician, a pragmatic and cold, difficult, sometimes disgusting, maybe, hard to believe what is hard thinking. The icon, Burma's democracy and human rights, but she's becoming completely changed. A pragmatic politician.
She's a very ambitious woman. I mean, with
very
a,
ambitious. Of course, everyone is ambitious. Nothing wrong to be ambitious. Even I would say that why she wants to be a president and whether she can be contented with the House Speaker position, or there's a rumor about creation of prime ministership if there's a compromise. So there are a lot of talk about rumors about speculation about what the powers that be are thinking. But I think, sure, she's been sacrificed a lot. She's been very honest, and she's been doing her personal life, and she wants to be president. Nothing wrong with that, I think.
Sorry, did you have something to follow up with?
Will she be able to do anything effective? Consider that we.
I don't know. That I don't know. I said yes in terms of changing policy. She will be very different. I think even on an issue of ethnic groups and small ethnic groups, I think she will start to talk about it. I think. I think I also realize that and the party is looking at the Buddhist population as their majority voters, and this issue has been very sensitive. If she starts to speak out, and there will be a lot of backfire, and if she doesn't, people will condemn her. If she does, people will still condemn her or blame her, accuse her. Anyway, so I think she might have thought that it's better to be quiet because they are looking at the majority of Buddhist population behind them, and.
Okay, now I've alluded to these matters. I think since you posed the question again, I really have to speak out again, you know. Well, I think I've already stated my case on the Rohingyas, you see, and you're not going to get anything out of her.
I mean, it's fair to say, isn't it? There is, outside the Rohingya population, there is zero sympathy for them in Myanmar. No one is going to win any votes for
Very
even
low,
raising the issue.
Very low, very low.
Yeah.
So I think she has to follow the herd. Let's put it that way. You know, she wants their votes. She's not going to alienate the Buddhist Burmese majority. She wants their votes, and she's a politician, so she'll neglect the Rohingyas. It's as simple as that. Please remember that. Okay. Now, on the economic and the government things too, well, I think I really gauged a measure a long time ago, you know. So we don't want to go into all these things now, as quite a lot of ground has been covered. But I think that in this election, it's more important that the NLD wins as a party rather than Aung San Suu Kyi wins as a leader, you know, because we need the NLD to be a buttress against the military dictatorship, and the NLD has to survive Aung San Suu Kyi. That's very, very important. We don't want the NLD to implode once Aung San Suu Kyi passes from the scene. That's very important long term for Myanmar. And one thing that we can expect that after these elections, power would be more spread out. I was talking about elections too. And I think the new fashion or the new trend in the world is for networks rather than hierarchies. Myanmar political parties, the NLD included, are very hierarchical, very top-down. You know, if I tell you the inside stories of what's happening in NLD, you know, you'll get nightmares. You know, so okay, I think we should talk less about Aung San Suu Kyi as an icon or a leader, and talk about building the NLD into a potent and effective democratic party.
And that's something arguably she has failed to do.
Yes, thanks for adding that.
Are there any other questions from anybody else? Please, make this the last question, please.
Kimiko Aoki from NHK World. I have two questions. One is, you said there is a change in mood. Does that extend to the minorities? And if they do, are there, and because you talked about coalition building, are there possibility of having a policy platform together with the opposition and the minority parties that could underpin their going forward the government to come? That's my first question. Second question is, you said that election is not too important and what happens after is important, but coming back to the election itself, I heard that there are problems with registrations. For the votes to be counted, for the voting to be meaningful to as many people as possible, are there responsibilities of international monitors and donors that support the election committee to make sure that as much as possible it will be fair, maybe not fair, but free?
Okay, so can the NLD form a partnership with the minorities? Is that lingering mistrust of Suu Kyi and the minorities still a factor? And how important will the role of international monitors be in, I mean, they're usually there in elections.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it crucial or not?
Thank you for those questions. Well, as a general rule of thumb, I would say in the first term that we have just coming to an end, the 5 years, I think the minorities as a whole, I would say generally have found both the Thein Sein administration and the NLD a disappointment. So you talk to all of them, and they say that we're going our own way, and this has happened before. There's nothing new in Myanmar. The Burma politicians and leaders squabbling among themselves, and ignoring the ethnic nationalities. I think the civil war is also one manifestation of that. So I think we have to need this new sense of togetherness, which I hope will spring out. Of course, there are differences among the minorities too. But again, having said that, the NLD is also making an effort to form alliances with some or quite a number of the ethnic parties, about coordination and cooperation in contesting the coming elections, so that there's no overlap or clash among allies in certain of the ethnic seats. But to what extent among the ethnic parties the NLD can make this kind of effort remains to be seen. But I know that a number of meetings, and workshops have been held between the NLD and the smaller ethnic parties too. The coming elections will also be notable for the amount of international, not only about the extent of international attention, but also actual monitoring, and observation, both from the United Nations and from bilaterals, and also from the NGOs. And yes, the donors will be funding a lot of those activities too. I think it'll be, inescapable that they would have to let the media in, and I think a lot of people will be running around. Observation and monitoring, not only from the international community but also domestically. I've heard some of my younger civil society friends and party people saying that a lot of the young people are going to be engaged in monitoring, so they won't be able to help the political parties, because they have to be neutral. Actually, the parties had wanted all these very young and active people to help with the campaigning. But if they're going to be in the monitoring process, of course, they have to stay in the middle. So that's also one of the things that I think we'll be having to face. But I think, yes, to wrap things up, I would say it's going to be a very significant election. Like I said, they've been saying very high stakes. And I think despite all the disappointments with the civil war and all that, I think there is a sense among the people and among the electorate that their vote is going to count, and they have to select very carefully. I want to compare this with 1995 years ago. There was also another small cyclone. It's called Cyclone Giri in October and November 2010, and there was a lot of widespread apathy. People were not interested. I went to a very sizable central Burma town, and people there didn't even realize that an election was imminent. There were no posters, there were no meetings. People were just going about their business, being concerned about the cyclone. But I think this time it's going to be different. I think we know that, well, in a way, we also would even like to be grateful that the military especially has really come out and showed itself for what it is, as a reminder to the people, no wishy-washy things, okay, this is what we did, and it's really up to the people to decide, okay, yeah.
Aung, do you have anything to add to that?
Not much. I think the UEC will allow UNFREL and Carter Centers, other international organizations to come to monitor. It will be very important, and they will continue to play an important role because I think there has been a lot of engagement. There has been a lot of meetings between these INGOs and election monitoring organizations and the UEC. As well as the UEC chairman, like it or not, he has to force to engage with the CSO, civil society, and media groups. And I think it is important, if you are very strategic, you got to force to make up their minds and put them in a straitjacket. And even though you know that they are going to cheat you, they're going to double cross you, but you got to make sure that they don't move around. You got to speak out, and you got to make sure that you've been watching them. And this election, the whole world, I think the media, everyone will be talking about, reporting it, watching it, monitoring it. And it is very important. I don't think because we have to also moderate our hope and expectation. And things in Burma could be turn out to be completely different from what you expect. So that is also important to manage your expectation. But I think hope is in the air, and then change may not be coming too fast. But I think this election is very important for people inside the country, and we got to keep up this hope and keep pushing for a genuine change in the country.
Will it be a smooth election? I mean, will there be unrest? Is there a risk of that?
That's a very important question, because of even ASSK, Aung San Suu Kyi, warn about instability, because she has known that the army or any dark elements, army doesn't have to do it. There are a lot of thugs being bred by those establishment, and they've been going around in the country because the state is so weak, as he said. In the West, states comes to your doorstep if you go to abuse your kids and children. But states in Burma is so weak, and so that states we don't know. There are warlords, there are thugs around, and they're being let them go free because of that. I think anything can happen between now and then. It's so important. So we wish this is going to be a smooth election, and if there's a new government comes into forming, and then there was smooth transition or smooth transfer of power, and there were a new government. If this establishment wants to keep the same status quo, I don't think people in Burma will accept it.
Thank you both very much. I'd like to give a warm round of applause to our two panelists. And thank you for making the effort to come all the way here.